Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor podcast, where we will discuss how to defer taxes on the sale of your property, earning passive real estate income, and everything you need to know to go from active investor to passive investor. Join us as we interview passive investment sponsors, explore the journey of other retiring real estate investors, and share our due diligence process we perform to select passive investments. Investment advisory services provided by Insight Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is only intended for clients and interested investors residing in the states in which we are registered to provide investment advisory services or exempt from registration. Please contact us to determine if the firm provides investment advisory services in the state where you reside. All content on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Material presented is believed to be reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness. Insight Investment Advisors, LLC and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing herein should be construed as such. Always consult with your tax advisor or attorney regarding your specific circumstances. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Retiring Real Estate Investor podcast. I'm excited today to be joined by Victoria Maidhof. She is should I call you the founder of Victory Properties and Asset Management?
Yeah, I say owner and CEO. I like CEO because it sounds, fancy.
She's in charge. So let's do that as a takeaway. So we had talked a few months ago, and I found it very fascinating what you were sort of working on inside of this business. And I saw application for our listeners in dealing with some of these problems, not only in managing the assets, but we talked about, recovering some of these properties that might be struggling. So we'll get into some of those aspects that we had talked about where you're kind of focused on some of the properties. But as a start, just introduce yourself maybe to our audience. How'd you end up in this space, in this business?
So I was basically born into the world of real estate. So my father, how it started is my father grew up very poor. He was a shoe shiner when he was a kid, one of 4 siblings, and his mother was schizophrenic and in and out of the mental hospital. And he was in foster care. He loved his father. He had a great dad, but he was always starting businesses, and he had PTSD from the war, and he struggled to take care of all of the kids. And so he was in and out of foster care. And when he entered high school, his father needed him to help take care of everybody. So he dropped out of high school and became a fisherman. And how my dad tells the story is that he was really bad at catching fish, but he was really good at wheeling and dealing, like buying and selling is what my dad says. So he could sell stuff on the docks, but he couldn't catch a fish. So how he became a ship scrapper, how that led to being a ship scrapper, I'm not exactly sure. But as he got a bit older, he ended up as a ship scrapper, essentially, which that is, he traveled the world to shipbreaking yards, scrapping ships. And if you can imagine, ships are, they're meant to withstand the ocean. So they're made of, what they're made of is, quite valuable. So brass, teak wood, the things of that nature. So he was literally pulling stuff off of ships, ship stores, lights, brass, whatever he could get, and bringing it back to San Diego, which is where I'm from. And he had like a little garage and an alleyway in San Diego, and he was literally selling this stuff out of alleyways. But he dreamt of being this real estate investor. My father's very educated, self-educated, so he was always reading, and he knew that if he could just get his hands on one piece of real estate, he could eventually grow himself a portfolio, and he would, get himself out of poverty. So once he had enough inventory, he wrote himself a business plan, and he went to 11 banks. And on the 11th bank, he got himself a loan for a piece of commercial real estate, a 65% down. And then the owner of the property carried the rest of the loan. And that's how he got his first piece of commercial real estate. And so I grew up watching my father essentially build his portfolio of mostly commercial real estate, but he also had apartment complexes, single family homes, all different types of properties. And when I got old enough, I took over managing it. But as a kid, he used to send me to get the delinquent rent checks.
Wow.
Yeah. So, which usually were quite high because my father, as a businessman and who grew up, poor, he's to this day, we have very different management styles. He can be kind of a softie with his tenants. So we had this one tenant, Mike, who I think he was like 15 grand. He was like Vi, or he calls me Victoria. I also go by Vi. We're not going on any trip unless you go get rent from Mike, so he'd send me over.
And how old were you? How old were you when you went over to go get that check?
I think I was 13.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. Yep.
Yeah. But Mike always said yes to me. He didn't give us the 15 grand, but he did cut me a check. So Mike always gave me something. So I could always get something from some part of the check. So that's how I got my start in real estate. And then as I managed his portfolio, I did that for years until I moved to Wisconsin, and then I entered the corporate world, essentially, of property management.
So this is like the ultimate entrepreneurial success story in America, right? You could build this is a story that you could write a book, build a movie on this.
Yeah.
This is it. Like this is how folks did it. So your grandpa did it, your dad moving into this business too. And then there you are as a 13-year-old collecting. You're the head of collections of the company.
Yeah.
This is the success story, right? So all right, so you're in right away. You're doing a role of property management extremely young. So this is probably a very formative experience. Like, so what do you take to property management now? Like, how has this formed you in thinking about the pros and cons of what folks should be or shouldn't be doing when they are managing these properties, or how you sort of think about other property management companies and how they're helping or maybe not helping the owner as much as they could?
My dad I have two very different points of view on property management, from my dad's style to the corporate world. So, and I really do appreciate both styles, and I sort of fall a little bit in the middle because I still help my father. He's in Florida now, and he has assets in San Diego and Florida, and I still help out whenever there's a new acquisition or they need some help with something. I still step in. But I really appreciate a lot of what I learned in the corporate world. I like I really follow fair housing, not just because it's the law, but it makes managing easier too when you have that rules in place that everything is the same, everyone is treated the same. It also makes managing easier. If I let you pay your rent on Friday, then I have to let 400 other people pay rent on Friday. It's fair, and it also makes the job easier. My father, on the other hand, will say, well, I let this guy squat in the unit because he gives extra eyes on the property. And I'll say, but Dad, if you let one guy squat in the unit, then you got to let all your residents squat in the unit. So, you know what I mean? So he kind of lets the properties a little bit more like the Wild West. I don't want to raise her rent because she's an older lady and she just makes cheerleading costumes, and I feel bad for her. You know what I mean? This sort of, he's got this real soft spot, so anyway, but at the same time, so I've worked in the corporate environment where there's just absolutely zero empathy at all, where I'm in an affordable housing complex and you've got these people that are struggling and their rent is $800, but the market rent is $16, and it's time they're up for renewal and their rent goes from $800 to $1,600. And then I've got my father whose market rent is, $12 a square foot, and he's charging $7.50. And I'm like, Dad, this is ridiculous. We got to get your rent up. And so we do a soft, I want to get it to 10 because He
Mhm.
wants to get it to 8. So we compromise and we do a gentle rent schedule so that it's, so there's a place in between, so I fall in between where it's like, this is a business,
Mhm.
but like, there's gotta be, you have to have, like, I call it the empathetic sea captain. You know what I mean? That's what I call running a property, is you have to be, it is a business. You have to be strict. You have to enforce rules. But you have to be empathetic. I feel like you need to be empathetic with people also. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Totally. Yeah, it was exactly what I was gonna ask you. Is there a middle ground between these two approaches, and is that almost optimal in
I
that?
really think there is. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the one that's like, for example, like sometimes my father, he'll say, "You're too corporate, you're too harsh." And I'm like, "Dad, I filed an eviction on somebody and I'm editing her cover letter and helping her with her resume and sending it to my old boss. I don't think that's too harsh. Like,
No.
I have to file an eviction. I'm enforcing the this is a legal document. This is her lease. I'm enforcing the lease."
Mhm.
But I'm also trying to help her. Like, there is, I do, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not,
Yeah.
I do think there can be a middle ground somewhere.
This really has to be more hands-on. I was having this conversation with one of my clients last night. This is a hands-on business. And so it's interesting you give that example of moving from that more of a corporate perspective of, hey, market's 1600, you're at 800, you're going to 1600. That may not be the best choice that really even optimizes profitability for that building, is it?
I don't think it does. I don't
Yeah.
think it's good for resident retention. I don't think it's good for, um, I think I think in the corporate world, they're not boots on the ground. So they don't see, how it affects the environment either.
Mhm.
And it's a turnover is very expensive. And you've got really good tenants that have been there for a really long time and they don't want to do, I see it in every property I've ever managed. You'll have someone there that's 15 years and they just want a few small updates in their unit. And the rule is, well, we don't do updates in units once we've got somebody there. And it's like, they're going to move because you're raising their rent significantly and they can get a nicer apartment for the same price, you know, down the street for this cost. You know what I mean? Or you're raising their, even in my own property that I own, I keep my rent I keep it a little bit below market because a good tenant's worth their weight in gold, honestly. Um, it's not always a smart business move to jack the rent up as high as possible, in my opinion, because um, a turnover costs a lot of money and losing a good resident, it's expensive.
Mhm.
You don't know what's going to happen when somebody moves out. So, but yeah, you want to create an environment on the property of happy people.
Mhm.
Um, because then they recommend the property to other people to move in. It's not good for occupancy necessarily, just to raise the rent as high as you can possibly raise it, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I've seen it. I've seen properties where they just jack the rent up as high as possible and people leave,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, then who comes in after them? It's always
you
it's an
don't
extreme.
know.
You're kind of taking a chance at that point of who comes
Right.
in
And then
after.
you have to turn the units and you don't know what they're going to look like when people move out, especially if they're angry.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen some of those pictures from our clients, and I'm like, whoa, wow,
Right.
it's heart stopping. Speaking of our clients, a lot of folks that are listening are active real estate owners, but they're beginning that transition to kind of take some of the day-to-day management off their table. What are some of the things they should think about if, like, all right, I'm ready to hire a property management company? How should they approach that?
Oh yeah. I have a whole PDF on that,
Oh, perfect.
on how to pick a third party management company. Um, Third party management companies. Well, the thing about third party management companies is you have to be really aware and really research your companies. And when you first hire somebody, you need to be pretty hands on, quite frankly, like super hands on, because I've worked for them and I don't want to use I mean, I have a description that I use.
You're trying to say nice things, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I call them fee scrapers, quite frankly.
So that's a
All
watch
of
out
them.
point.
I've
We
worked
got
for
to
some
watch out for
companies
we
too.
got to watch out for folks that are there to scrape fees. I mean, it's something we have to watch out
That's
for.
what I'm saying. I mean, they're good. They're really great companies. But they're mainly they're occupancy specialists. They're there to fill the units because that's how they get paid. I mean, you have to recognize that they're there for their bottom line. So what I recommend is a few different things. Check your listings when they post them because your photography should be really excellent. So if they're renting your units, they shouldn't be sitting on the market for a long time. First of all, you should be on top of checking. They should show you their work orders and what they're charging for. Like this is when you first hire a company, because I've seen work orders where it says went to look at the apartment, but it was raining outside, so left, and the owner got billed $250 for this sort of thing. So you need to be. They're not interested in nurturing the financial health and wealth of your property. That's not what they do typically. So they're there to fill your units and provide you with the maintenance. And maintenance is often where they really get you. So are they charging tenants for the things they cause, for clogged disposals and toilets? When they turn units, are they checking the work? I have seen that they don't do that. So if they're going in and painting the unit or cleaning the unit before somebody else moves in, are they going back and checking on those vendors to make sure the work was done properly so that the new people that move in aren't unhappy with the work? Are they doing that? There's just you just have to really do your due diligence when you hire a new company, because there's a lot of ways that they can overcharge you for things, and I've seen it happen. So like I said, when you hire somebody, you just have to be really on top of it until you trust them. To make sure
I want to put that PDF in the show notes. So make sure let's grab a link for that so people can go through that.
Yeah, sure.
Is that a monthly thing? Do you think landlords should be, property owners should be checking in? Is it almost daily with that new property?
No, I think monthly, checking your work orders, getting your financial reports. Sometimes they don't let you set the rent. I think you should be setting your rent. It just depends on the company. It's almost like my recommendations for when you hire a third party company, management company, are basically you're doing quite a bit of work to make sure that they're doing their job properly. But I don't really know what else you can do because, investors, the more properties that you buy, the busier you get. So, you don't really have a choice. Sometimes you sort of have to. I say, if you have a small portfolio, do it yourself.
Yeah. At some point you're either gonna do it yourself and then scale that property management internally, or you're gonna need a third party, right? One point or the other, and you have to make that decision whether you can manage and do that yourself or if you need assistance. Am I thinking about that the right way?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a struggle. We've always managed within the family. Even our properties in San Diego, we still manage them ourselves. We have people that we know that check in on them. And drive by your property regularly. How's the curb appeal? Because that's something that gets neglected a lot. If you're out and about, go drive by your property. Is there trash in the yard? How do the porches look? Are they taking? And here's another thing I recommend. Are they sending out tenant surveys to check? Tenants like to complain a lot, so sometimes you got to take them with a grain of salt. But if you're getting the same kind of complaints, like they're not answering my emails, they're not answering my calls, like they should be sending out tenant surveys so that you can get a feel for how happy your tenants are. Is there a lot of turnover? Are people moving out a lot because they're not happy with the company? Things like that should be, being done on the property.
I'm hearing a little bit more than just checking the financials each month.
Yeah. Financials, how's your property? Yeah, I'm basically saying there's a lot of work you have to do.
There's more metrics beyond that we need to keep our eye on. beyond simply the financials, because
it's
that's the end product, right? We want to know what
Yeah.
we're doing to kind of get there, right?
At least when you, I mean, this is what I would do. I mean, now this is coming from someone from the industry that's worked in property management. I would recommend that you do these things for when you first hire a company. I mean, you don't necessarily have to do this long term, but I would recommend when you first hire a company, staying on top of it till you really know that, you've hired the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Unless maybe somebody that's, they recommended by someone that that's an investor that's worked with them. But this is what I would personally do if I was hiring a company. I would be driving by my property, checking my financials, doing tenant surveys. I would be doing all this stuff. But maybe I'm just, these are the things I would be doing.
No, it's perfect. I mean, that's what we want is sort of the perspective from someone who's inside those companies to tell us frankly how to manage them, because
that's what I would be doing.
You can see where the bodies are buried, so to speak, right? And we kind of want to know what's going on there. So there's more work to do here than, hey, I hired somebody, I'm just going to kind of kick it over the fence now and work on some of my other properties or more acquisitions. There's way more work to do here than I think people expect.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would recommend doing, at least for like the first few months.
So then, gosh, that's very helpful, I think, for our listeners. So help our listeners understand. So with Victory Properties and Asset Management, you're doing a lot more than a typical third-party firm that wants to come in and manage.
Right. Assets. So I don't do long-term management. I do kind of a lot of things because people keep asking me to do other things.
That's why I'm doing good. People ask you to do next.
So my company's sort of growing and expanding as people ask me to do other things. So like the heart of my company, so I'm a real estate advisor, also AKA treasure hunter, is what I call myself. I help investors with their assets, with their current assets. I help them make more money with them. So I'd say like the heart of my company, like at least my favorite thing to do is and I'll give you like a little case study, an example of what I do. So I had a property that was 33 unit warehouse property. And it was doing really well, made about $500,000 a year, full occupancy. Everybody paid their rent on time. The owner didn't want my services. He said, "Oh, everything's fine here. We're fine." But the son said to me, "Look, we need to put in a fence. We need parking lot lamps, lights. I'd like to make a little bit more money here. Can you help us out?" So I said, "Sure." So I basically looked over all their financials, looked at everything going on in the property, did a market study, looked at, asked a lot of questions. I worked with the brother and their accountant. I kind of left the main investor alone because he wasn't really that interested. Mm-hmm. I mean, lots of questions. Do you charge for parking? I mean, lots of property management questions. Do you do regular inspections? I mean, those kinds of questions. And what I found was that they weren't charging CAM fees. They were paying $20,000 just in water and trash. Their rent was significantly under market. They had one tenant that wasn't paying rent. One unit alone was causing them to lose $10,000 a year just because it was so undesirable, because they had one tenant taking over the whole parking lot. So there was no parking by this one unit. So they couldn't charge market rent. They had just an array of problems. And so I basically drew up a report with all my recommendations using basically property management techniques, is what I call it, and financial analysis. They wanted a website, they were getting paper checks that were being deposited in a box, so it was kind of antiquated. And with all of my recommendations for what they should do on this property, and then they have the option of having me implement what to do. And and then I also take into account how they like to manage the property. So I gave them two options, basically a soft report. Here's a way to make $93,000 on your property. by doing it sort of your kind of way. Here's how you make 150 if you do it my way, essentially. So I found them the money I found them more money than they wanted on the property. And the report basically was like, here's your report. It costs this much. And then if you want to hire me, and they could go through and pick what they want me to do, So we did assigned parking. We did, a rent schedule. They didn't want to charge full camp fees, but they did want to do charge for the water and the trash. There was enough parking to 33 extra spaces so that they could charge for those spaces. I mean, there was a whole bunch of different things that they could do. I mean, it really wasn't, for me, it wasn't hard to find the money, but they didn't see it because they haven't been in property management. So that's one thing I do. I also have my real estate license, and I've specialized in distressed properties. So I work with agents. I have one agent who he wants to get into commercial. He's doing commercial sales, but he doesn't know how to prep a property for sale. So you'll see a lot of commercial properties that sit on the market for a long time until they expire. So he'll hire me for like a management fee. So if it needs leased, if it needs renovations, things like that, I'll come in and do any kind of property management prep so that it can be sold. I also will do my own sales for commercial sales.
I was curious if more people come to you when their property is listed for sale or about to be listed for sale, or if it's more of an ongoing management thing where they're going to hold this property for a while and they feel like, hey, something's wrong here. I need some help.
People don't come to me when their properties are listed for sale because they are under contract with other people.
Gotcha.
But I have had agents come to me and ask me for help.
Gotcha. The agent sees it and goes, "Whoa, wait a second.
Right.
We need to get this thing moving a little bit better."
Right. I've had people come to me as their listing's about to expire and say, "Look, my building is expiring." Because they didn't know how to sell it because of, XYZ. I'm interested in hiring you because you're better at distressed properties, and they didn't know what they were doing. But if they're under contract with somebody else, they can't. I mean, I guess technically they could come to me and say, "Hey, you're a manager," but I haven't had anybody do that.
Gotcha.
But I have had agents come to me. I have reached out to some agents and said, "Hey, do you want some help here?" I'll just to offer them advice, to network a little bit. And most agents don't want anything to do with me. They think I'm going to steal their deal. But I've just done it just like, because I'll see a listing that's like something that would take me 5 minutes. I could just offer them some tips.
Yeah.
And I just think maybe it's a chance to network with somebody. Yeah. And they'll say, "You can buy it."
I guess I could. That might solve their problem too.
I'm like, I don't want to buy it. You need to fix this property.
Yeah, I get some of that pushback from our perspective too, from some agents. But at the end of the day, I mean, if agents have a bit more of a abundance mentality, we're both just here to help.
Yeah.
You help close deals, I help close deals. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I love property management, talking about it. So, I mean, I've even had potential clients that couldn't afford me, and I've sort of like helped them out with things. You know what I mean? I had one client, he wanted me to help him research properties, and the property he was going to pull the trigger on something that would have bankrupted him. And I just basically I did like 3 or 4 hours worth of work on this property, studying it and doing all this work on it just to help the guy because I didn't want him to go bankrupt. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, it was just, I like helping people too. So, but, so I do that. And like if somebody wants me to help them do project management on their flips, another person has me doing their markets research for the properties they want to buy. I keep getting asked to do all these other things. Yeah. So, if it has to do with real estate, you're
onto it.
Making people money.
How long does it take so I want to engage you and say, "Hey, come fix my property," right? How long does that process take for you to sort of identify those things and maybe deliver a report? And then how long does it take then for you to start to implement some of those items for improvement?
It really depends on the size of the property and the level of how severe the like distress it is.
Mm.
The 33 unit warehouse property took me it took me a while. That one took me a little while because it really was, there was kind of a bit of chaos on it, on that property. But I did a fourplex property. I'm also very thorough, and I am very anal and obsessive. So you know, if I think it's going to take me 10 hours, I always spend more time on it than, you know, I would probably is necessary. Like I don't charge for as much time as I spend on the report, essentially, you know what I mean? It just depends on the size and how, and I have to start diving into it, you know.
Yeah. It's a lot to kind of dig into, right? All that
Yeah.
a lot of that information isn't readily accessible or publicly available, right? You have to really dig to find this stuff.
Yeah. So if I had done all the implementation on that warehouse property, it probably would have I would have been in and on and off site for a few months, you know.
Yeah, is it that long? And that implementation, is it really, gosh, ideally, if you got all the way in, is that a 6 month, is that even a year-long process?
It can
Really
be
get those things moving?
if it's like what I call like an SOS property, like an SOS management intervention, like where a property is severely distressed. I mean, it can be, you know, and I now have I have a large management company I'm in talks with. They're going to help back me if I need more muscle, so I can take on larger properties, which is kind of exciting. Like if I need bigger maintenance, if I need extra property managers, you know, to help me so I can take on, you know, large properties. So I have more, you know, manpower. But yeah, it could take, depending, I mean, if it's a 100-unit building that's got $150,000 in delinquency, you know, and 70% occupancy, that could take 6 months, you know, 6-7 months, depending, you know. But if it's just, you know, it really just depends, you know. If it's a couple of units and it's, you know, if it's 4 units and it's got some problems, you know, I work pretty quick. You know, I had an 84-unit property before I started this company that was just like I described, and I got it prepped for sale in 6 months without any assistance. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So okay, but it is still extremely time consuming.
Yeah, I mean, I was working like 70 hours a week, and I did have maintenance, and I had a manager and stuff. So
when you think about when you start to look at some of these properties, maybe not the SOS properties, but maybe your typical property that you're looking at, what are those big mistakes that property owners are making that you're finding constantly over and over again? What are those big areas that you constantly see as, oh, there it is again? Same thing.
what are some big areas? I think one thing that I see a lot is inconsistency. I think that you really have to be very consistent with holding people accountable for lease violations. It doesn't matter how small the violation is. I mean, it doesn't matter how small you think it is. When you hold people accountable for the little tiny things, they know they can't get away with the big things. So that's the first thing I do when I walk into a distressed property is I start 5-daying for small things. I start billing for, oh, your dog pooped on the grass. I start putting signs up. Okay, that's going to be a $250 charge if your dog poops on the grass. Oh, you left your bag of trash outside by the door or in the hallway. So I had to carry it to the dump. I'll put gloves on myself and dig through the trash to find the mail and find out whose it is, and then knock on their door and tell them, you know, I'm billing you. I mean, like enforcing every little thing and running your property like that especially like if you have a property that's, troubled. When people know that they can't get away with small things, they're more likely to pay their rent on time. That's how people ask me, how do you raise delinquency? Is when you come in like with that kind of an attitude. But also, like I said, being a good listener and super empathetic, and also solving all of their problems, like maintenance orders, and et cetera, et cetera. But enforcing lease violations and being consistent, like I said, following fair housing is like huge. Even with, I know commercial properties, they say, oh, fair housing rules are different or whatever, but I follow the same. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I think consistency with lease violations.
Do you think owners miss some of that stuff? Because do you think it's a time thing, or do you think it's a process and systems thing? Why they miss some of the small stuff?
I honestly, I think that sometimes, at least like some of the like investors that I've met as of recently, like I think that this is going to sound, I think sometimes people don't. I've seen it with my dad. I've seen it with people I've met recently. I think it's like they don't want to be mean or something. Like they think that I hate to say that, but sometimes it seems like people are they think that they're like, at least I know with my dad, he thinks they're being mean. I get in arguments with my dad and my brother because they say, oh, we don't want to be jerks. We don't want to be this or that. And I'm like, you're not, it's business is business. Or, if we raise the rent, it's not going to be nice or this or that, but it's,
are really the key towards, not only optimizing the property, but in helping people pay rent. So when you're picking them up for some of the smaller lease violations, I was curious why that happens. Is it the owners are not sort of watching, or they don't have the time, or is it the systems thing where why are they missing that stuff?
Oh, why are they missing that?
Yeah.
In all honesty, I don't know if this is, I've asked myself that before, and this is going to sound, just in people that I have met recently and people that I've known a lot of property managers, and I've known a lot of investors. I've gone to investor groups and I've talked with people and they've asked me questions, and it seems like a lot of people have a hard time being tough.
Interesting.
Which is surprising because, like we had talked about before, is that landlords get this bad rap for being like the big bad landlord, and you're certainly treated like that in court. Yeah. I've been to court a lot, and you are treated that way.
Yeah. It's very true.
But I in my experience with people that I have known, is that people have a hard time being tough with people. Even my father's been in this business for 50 years. My brother's supposed to be, he's taken over since I've left, and it's really challenging working with them and stepping in there. I mean, we get an argument, I have to just walk away sometimes because we just different points of view. They think I'm being mean because I say, this is business, they want to, they're too nice. And I'm, they think because I want to enforce rules, I'm being mean,
I view your approach, you sound more like a good parent.
That's kind of how it is.
That's kind of like the way I view it. Like
how it is. And
you're gonna be tough sometimes, right?
The thing about it is,
just for your own good.
The other thing about it is, when you go on a property, especially like I'm talking about, when you have a trouble property and you start enforcing rules and lease violations, you will get residents coming into your office and thanking you for solving the problems on the property. You'll have some people that are angry with you, but most of the time they'll come back and say, I'm sorry I left my trash there. It won't happen again. I had one property that had the worst cockroach infestation I've ever seen in my life. I'm talking the floor moving. I mean, just absolutely horrible. And the excuse was from the previous manager, well, we can't get the residents to let them into spray, because you have to have them move all their stuff out of their cupboards.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a hassle.
Yeah.
And they won't
Not
do
easy.
it. We can't get them to do it. And I said, well, you slap a note on their door that says if they don't move their stuff out of their cupboards, they're going to have to pay. They have to pay a fee.
Yeah.
I
Make
cured
them do
that
it.
cockroach problem.
Mhm.
Because people, you know what I mean? You just put a note on the door that says you're going to have to pay. And then they did. We cured that building, and we couldn't rent that building out because of the cockroaches. It's just, you just have to be a little bit forceful sometimes,
Find the right thing to do, which is obviously taking care of that situation and kind of roll over the obstacles in your way and go
I'm
and do
like,
it.
it's best. I mean, this is the best thing for the residents too. If
Yes.
if they don't want cockroaches in their units, and they're
No.
gonna spread.
Yeah. And it's funny. I think maybe it's some of the residents you don't hear from all the time, and those are usually your best tenants too.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
got to think about what's in their best interest, not just the
Absolutely.
squeaky wheels that you keep hearing
Yep.
from. Those probably aren't your best tenants.
Yep. And then Julie comes and gives notice, and you say, why are you moving, Julie? And then she says, well, I have, and then she gives you 10 complaints, and you had no idea because she didn't want to be a complainer.
Exactly. But you should have known those 10 complaints because they're probably pretty obvious, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why every time I take over a property, anytime I meet a tenant, I say, please tell me every single problem you have with the property. I want to know the tiniest detail, complain about everything. It doesn't matter what it is. I want to hear it, because I can't fix something I don't know about. That's another thing I tell landlords and investors. Communicate with your tenants. Ask them to complain. Tell them to complain to you, because if you don't, because a certain problem could take 6 months to fix, and if you don't know about it, you can't fix it.
Will you go to door in some of those properties that you're taking over or providing a service on? Will you go to door and try to speak to every single tenant?
I put out a letter, or if it's a big property, I put out a letter with like a super nice letter, and I'll even put a little photo on it with all my contact information. Another thing I do, which my managers always don't like, is I use the company phone as my communication line with my residents so they could text me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because the office phone's always ringing off the hook. So I always put a letter out with the cell phone number, with the text number, and then invite them in to come meet me, like have a meet and greet. Is usually what I do. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, complain. There's a lesson takeaway. Lots of takeaways right now, but that's a big takeaway, folks. Go tell your tenants to complain.
Tell them to come complain. Yeah. And be a really good listener and try to take care of the problems. Yeah. I mean, I've had people come in and tell me they're going to kill me, and then come back and apologize and bring me flowers, because I listened to them.
If that's not the life of a property owner, property investor, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to court on the 11th. I got to go to a criminal trial because I watched a big brawl, and there were little kids by the fight. So I charged over there to move the little kids, and I got maced in the face. By accident. They were macing somebody else, but the wind blew and it got me in the face too. So, but I didn't want, I was like, it's fine. It was a good story that night.
And let that be a lesson. Real estate investing is not passive.
Yeah. So
as evidenced by the mace in the face.
That's just one of many stories.
There's too many stories. I hear them all from our clients. I'm like, this is not a passive. The first person who called real estate investing passive.
Yeah, that was my first day on the job, and I couldn't have been happier with that story either. I was so proud.
No one will ever accuse you of not being in the trenches. That's for sure.
I was in high heels running towards it.
Yeah. Not run away from that problem. Well, this has been awesome. I think we could kind of keep going on some of these stories, but there's really good nuggets I think here for property owners to be listening to optimize their properties, to be thinking about. I know a lot of our listeners are thinking about, how do I get more passive? How do I involve third-party management? Cautions there too. And if they have issues with their property, they should really be reaching out to you. What's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you?
Well, I have my website, which is being redesigned right now, which will be launching in January, but you can still visit it. It's www.victorypropertyassets.com. You can call me at, I don't know if I could say my phone number.
You're more than welcome to. I got mine up in the corner if people are watching us on YouTube, so knock yourself out.
Let's see if I can remember it. 608-473-5884, or you can email me at vy@victoryassets.com.
Awesome.
Is that my email? victorypropertyassets.com, or
Got
you
it.
can link it. Yeah, call me is a good way to get a hold of me.
There you go. And that's what we always prefer as real estate folks. Just pick up the phone.
Just give me a call. Text me. You can call me or text me anytime. Yeah.
There you go. And have a conversation. Victoria, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing this wisdom.
Yeah, this is
in
fun.
the trenches property management. This is where you make money. It's where you make and break the properties, is doing this work, and you're helping folks make it. And that's a huge thing. So thank you.
I can make you money.
There you go. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, take care.
Bye.